But first, we want to begin with that article that we mentioned that has many discussing a deadly and frankly more common threat here in the United States. Of course, we're talking about mass shootings. Here in Texas, we have seen the heartache and some of the struggles that follow in communities like Uvalde or Sutherland Springs. People there were left trying to make sense of the deaths of innocent folks, including children, in places like schools and even churches. Earlier today, the Washington Post took the rare step of publishing some graphic images following the aftermath of mass shootings. So right now we want to go ahead and bring in the senior investigations editor from the Washington Post. His name is Peter Walston. Peter, thank you so much for being with us. You were the lead editor on this article, and I want to make sure that we specify, because this is very important here, that this article was laser focused on mass shootings involving specifically AR-15. So that's what we're talking about here. That was the gun of choice there. What was the main reason, first of all, for publishing this?
Well, we've been focusing all year. We've been producing a series of stories on the AR-15, and we chose to focus on that weapon because it is one of the most popular firearms in the country. It also happens to be, more than any other, the most commonly used firearm in the deadliest mass shootings in this country, especially since 2012. So, we all, as news organizations, cover these tragedies one at a time as they occur. They're huge news stories. But oftentimes, journalists don't go back and explore these as sort of a common cumulative phenomenon in this country. It's relatively recent that these have become such a regular occurrence. And so we decided that, a lot of Americans don't really understand what it's like inside these shootings. We write about the victims, we write about the guns, we write about the gunmen, but really we rarely go back and revisit the survivors, the first responders, the locations. Again and again and again in this country, normal everyday gathering spots are turned upside down. People's lives are shattered, and so we were looking for a new and fresh way in on this. Sure. What's become a fairly a regular, what we call today, a recurring American nightmare.
Unfortunately, that is the truth. It is a recurring American nightmare. Peter, if you could, I want you, because this has drawn a lot of attention right now, the content of the article. Describe the kind of conversations maybe that were being had within your newsroom that brought you all to this point where you felt that you had to publish some of these very graphic photos.
Yeah, well, like I said, we've been looking at the AR-15 from all angles. A few months ago, we published a story. The headline was "The Blast Effect," and that looked really narrowly at how bullets fired by AR-15s destroy the human body. The blast effect is literally the phenomenon where the bullet at such a high velocity enters the body and eviscerates the organs and the tissue inside. But what we discovered in looking at these photos, and by the way, we did that using animations. We used autopsy reports from real victims, but we animated it so that people could really see with precision what happened. But after we did that story, a lot of readers said, well, that's great, but why don't you show us what really happens? The media never really covers what really happens, the real damage done. And so we didn't know if we would do that or we wouldn't, but about 6 months ago, we started gathering up all the pictures and videos that we could, just to see if we thought that there was another story to tell, whether there's more to the story. And we discovered that there is more to the story.
Yeah. There's been lots of mixed reaction, as I'm sure you know, involving the photos surrounding this piece. Two families in Uvalde have shared opposing views on this article. I want to share some of that with you here. Brett Cross, who was a father figure to one of the victims in that shooting, posted on social media. He said, quote, "While these photos are disturbing and truly shocking, it lets you see just a modicum of the scenes that constantly invade my thoughts and nightmares." Also, a mother of one of the victims in the shooting at Robb Elementary urging people not to share the Washington Post article, saying that she was heartbroken because the loved ones lost in that shooting were unable to rest. Those were the comments, some of the mixed reaction that we're reading and seeing. Peter, I'm sure you've heard a lot of it too. You've probably read it yourself. What do you say as these mixed reactions continue to come in? Because it was a pretty bold move on y'all's part to publish this.
Yeah, I've certainly seen all that reaction. I've actually spoken with some of the families myself. We took a pretty extraordinary step in the last few days. We've been working on this story for a long time, and we put a lot of thought and care into what we would show. And the story is not just photos and videos, it's also personal accounts. I mean, quotes. The story is really, in many ways, in oral history. It's the story is told by the people who have survived and experienced these things firsthand, including first responders describing what they see. The pictures, we don't show bodies, identifiable bodies. In these pictures. They are very disturbing pictures. There's been some misunderstanding out there, people believing that we have shown recognizable bodies. That's not true. But we did take an extraordinary step over the last few days. We reached out to all of the communities affected by these shootings, the 11 shootings in particular that we wrote about, and we notified them to make sure that they knew so they could avoid the story if they wanted to. And we, this is not, we don't normally do this as journalists. We don't often just tell the world what we're doing before we do it. But in this case, we thought that it was incredibly important because we wanted to balance the need to advance the public's understanding of what happens, the danger and the destructive power of these weapons, with the need to be sensitive to the families. And we really worked hard to do both.
Yeah, I think you certainly achieved that. Peter, with the discussion moving towards what's next, I'm wondering what kind of precedents you think publishing the article sets now for the role of journalists covering mass shootings in the future. Obviously, these are jumping off points for a lot of conversations, a lot of debate that is had, and hopefully it could lead to some kind of a policy change. But what kind of precedents do you think this article sets for the job that we do moving forward?
Well, I think one thing it does it reminds us that this is, as I said earlier, a cumulative phenomenon. This is something that happens again and again and again, and it's really important for us as journalists to cover them as with that in mind, that these don't just happen and go away. This is a sort of growing list of victims, survivors, first responders, people whose lives are forever changed, who have firsthand experiences. And not only that, every American who goes to the grocery store, goes to church, goes to synagogue, goes to a concert, goes to an outlet mall, goes out at night in a bar district, what have you. These are all the types of places that are forever changed when a shooting like this happens. And we can all imagine it happening to us wherever we are. And so I think that it's important for us as journalists to remember that, to cover these as tragedies that affect real people, the people not only who are killed and the families of those people, of those victims, but all of the other people involved, the first responders who have to investigate and those who have to clean it up and everybody else in the country. And so I think it's new to take 11 shootings and cover them essentially. The story, we structured it, the chronology of of a typical mass shooting, but telling the stories through those who have experienced all 11. They share so many characteristics, despite it doesn't matter the year or the place, it's the same story.
Unfortunately, as you mentioned, Peter, it is a recurring nightmare in this country, one that we all hope and we pray daily will end soon. But thank you again very much for your time, Peter, and for explaining sort of everything that went on behind the scenes before this article was published. We appreciate the insight. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Peter.